I'm Angela, 34 years old, and a software engineer from Boston. Last month, I finally bought my dream home after 12 years of saving every penny, while my friends enjoyed vacations in new cars. Never did I imagine that my own father would demand I hand over my house to my sister Sophia, claiming she deserved it more than me. What hurt worse than his demand was discovering what my sister had been hiding from our entire family for years. Before I tell you how I discovered my sister's ultimate betrayal, let me know where you're watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family who took you for granted. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Boston, it became clear early on that my father had a favorite child, and it wasn't me. While I worked hard for every achievement, my sister Sophia seemed to effortlessly win his approval with little more than a smile. My mother noticed the imbalance, but rarely intervened, preferring to maintain peace in our household at all costs. From the beginning, Sophia and I were like night and day. I was the responsible one who saved my allowance, studied for exams weeks in advance, and always followed the rules. Sophia, 2 years younger than me, was charming and spontaneous, but also manipulative and entitled. When something went wrong, she knew exactly how to twist the story to make herself the victim and me the villain. And our father always believed her version. Angela just doesn't understand how to have fun, my father would say, dismissing my achievements while praising Sophia's mediocre efforts. Not everyone needs to be so serious about everything. When college application time came around, I threw myself into the process. I wrote and rewrote essays, applied for every scholarship I could find, and maintained my perfect GPA while working part-time at the local library. The result was a partial scholarship to a prestigious engineering program, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. I took out student loans and continued working throughout college, often taking 18 credit hours per semester, while balancing 20 hours of work each week. Meanwhile, Sophia attended community college, sporadically switching majors 3 times before dropping out altogether when she met her future husband Marcus during her 3rd year. My father didn't seem concerned about her lack of direction or ambition. Instead, he praised her for following her heart. Not everyone needs a fancy degree to be successful, he told me when I expressed concern about Sophia's future. Your sister knows what she wants. After graduating with honors in computer science, I landed an entry-level position at a software company. The pay wasn't great, but it was a foot in the door of the industry. I lived with 2 roommates in a tiny apartment, ate ramen more often than I'd like to admit, and put every spare dollar toward paying off my student loans and building savings. Over the next decade, I worked my way up in the industry. Each promotion meant more responsibility, but also better pay. I changed companies twice for better opportunities, eventually landing a senior developer position at a financial technology company. All the while, I maintained my frugal lifestyle, rarely splurging on anything beyond necessities. Why don't you treat yourself more, my friends would ask. Take a vacation, or at least buy yourself something nice. But I had a goal: home ownership in one of the most expensive housing markets in the country. Every time I was tempted to spend, I reminded myself of that dream. Last year, after 12 years of disciplined saving, I finally had enough for a substantial down payment. I started house hunting, spending weekends touring properties, and evenings researching neighborhoods. The process was both exciting and exhausting, with several failed offers, before I founded a beautiful craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a reasonable commute to my office. The house wasn't perfect. The kitchen needed updating, and the hardwood floors had seen better days. But the moment I walked through the front door, I could visualize my future there. The bay window in the living room would be perfect for a reading nook. The backyard was just the right size for a garden. The spare bedroom would make an ideal home office. After a nerve-wracking bidding process, my offer was accepted. The closing process took 6 weeks, during which I oscillated between excitement and terror. What if something went wrong? What if the inspection revealed major issues? What if I couldn't afford the payments after all? But everything went smoothly, and on a sunny Friday afternoon, I signed the final papers and received the keys to my very first home. I sat in my car outside the title company, keys in hand, and cried tears of joy and relief. 12 years of sacrifice had finally paid off. That weekend, I moved in with help from friends. My furniture looked sparse in the larger space, but I didn't mind. I had plans to fill the house slowly, purchasing quality pieces that would last rather than rushing to fill every corner. The first few nights in my new home were surreal. I kept expecting someone to knock on the door and tell me there had been a mistake, that this beautiful house couldn't possibly belong to me. But as the days passed, I began to settle in, arranging my belongings and planning future projects. 2 weeks after moving in, I decided it was time to host a housewarming party. I wanted to share my achievement with the people who had supported me along the way, including my family. I sent out invitations, planned a simple but elegant menu, and spent days cleaning and preparing my new home to make the best possible impression. The night before the party, I stood in my living room looking around at the space I had created. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly proud of myself. I had done this all on my own without help from anyone. Little did I know that my moment of pride would soon be overshadowed by the biggest family conflict of my life. The morning of my housewarming party arrived with perfect weather, sunny but not too hot, ideal for using both the indoor and outdoor spaces of my new home. I had spent the previous day preparing food, cleaning every surface until it gleamed, and arranging fresh flowers in vases throughout the house. Everything was ready, and I couldn't wait to show off my achievement to friends and family. My parents and Sophia were scheduled to arrive an hour before the other guests. I wanted to give them a private tour of the house before it filled with people. When their car pulled into the driveway, I hurried out to greet them, eager to see their reactions. "Welcome to my new home," I said, hugging each of them. My mother returned the embrace warmly, while my father and Sophia seemed more reserved. "It's a nice neighborhood," my mother commented as we walked up the front path. "Very charming." I led them through the front door into the entryway, where natural light streamed through a stained glass window, casting colorful patterns on the hardwood floor. "The house was built in 1928, I explained, unable to contain my excitement. "A lot of the original features are still intact, like this woodwork and the glass fixtures." My mother made appropriate sounds of admiration as I showed them through the living room with its bay window, the dining room with original built-in cabinets, and the kitchen, which I admitted needed updating, but had good bones. "I'm planning to replace the countertops and maybe the cabinets eventually," I said. "But it's functional for now, and I want to live in the space a while before making any major changes." Throughout the tour, I kept glancing at my father, hoping for some sign of approval or pride, but his expression remained neutral. Sophia trailed behind, examining everything with an intensity I found odd but attributed to curiosity. "And this is the master bedroom," I said, leading them into my sanctuary at the back of the house. "It gets morning sun, which I love, and there's an ensuite bathroom, which was a must-have for me." "How much did you pay for all this?" my father asked, his first real question of the tour. I told him the price, adding, "It was at the top of my budget, but mortgage rates were good, and I had saved enough for a 20% down payment to avoid PMI. He nodded, but made no comment. After showing them the second bedroom I was using as a home office, and the guest room where Sophia would stay when visiting with her children, we made our way to the backyard. "I've got plans for a vegetable garden here," I said, pointing to a sunny spot, "and maybe a small patio area for entertaining." The tour complete, we returned to the kitchen where I poured glasses of iced tea. Other guests would be arriving soon, and I wanted to enjoy a quiet moment with my family first. "So what do you think?" I asked, looking from one face to another. "It's lovely, dear," my mother said sincerely. "You've done wonderfully." My father took a slow sip of his tea before responding. "It's a big house for one person." The comment stung, but I kept my smile in place. "Well, I wanted room to grow into, and it's nice to have space for guests." Sophia, who had been unusually quiet throughout the tour, finally spoke. "The school district is really good here, isn't it? That would be great for the kids." "Yes," I agreed, pleased she'd noticed something I'd researched carefully. That was one of the selling points for me, thinking long-term, you know. The doorbell rang, announcing the first of my other guests. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of introductions, tours, and conversations. My coworkers and friends were genuinely happy for me, their congratulations and housewarming gifts making me feel celebrated and supported. Throughout the party, I noticed my father in deep conversation with Sophia, both of them looking serious. Several times I caught them glancing my way, then quickly looking away when I noticed. It was odd, but I was too busy hosting to give it much thought. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I suggested my family stay for dinner. Nothing fancy, I assured them. I made a lasagna this morning that we can heat up. They agreed, and once the last guest had departed, we settled around my new dining room table with plates of food and glasses of wine. The conversation was light at first news about extended family, my mother's garden club, my recent work projects. But there was an underlying tension I couldn't quite identify. Finally, after a lull in the conversation, my father cleared his throat and set down his fork. "Angela, your mother and I have been thinking." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "About what?" "About this house." He gestured around the room. "It's really much too big for just you." I frowned. "I don't think so. And anyway, I like having the space." "What your father means," my mother interjected, "is that it seems like a lot to manage on your own." "I'm managing fine," I said, confused by the direction of the conversation. My father leaned forward. "The thing is, Sophia really needs a stable living situation right now. The divorce has been hard on her and the kids, and they're in that tiny apartment with astronomical rent." I glanced at Sophia, who was studying her plate, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. A sense of foreboding washed over me. "Dad, what exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. "We think Sophia deserves this house more than you do," he said flatly. "She has 2 children who need stability and space to play. You're just one person with a good job and plenty of options." The statement hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "You think I should give my house to Sophia?" "It makes the most sense," he continued, as if we were discussing something as trivial as switching seats at a dinner table. "You can find another place easily. For Sophia, having a house like this in the school district would be life-changing." I looked to my mother, expecting her to object to this outrageous suggestion, but she merely looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. "This is my house," I said slowly. "I saved for 12 years to afford it. I made sacrifices while Sophia was making poor decision after poor decision. And now you want me to just hand it over to her?" "Don't be so selfish, Angela," my father replied, his tone hardening. "Family helps family. Sophia needs this more than you do right now." "Selfish?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "How is it selfish to keep the home I worked for and paid for with my own money? The kids would love it here." Sophia finally spoke, her voice soft and practiced in the victim tone I knew all too well. "They've been through so much with the divorce, having a yard to play in their own rooms. It would help them heal." I felt as if I had stepped into some alternate reality where my hard work and achievements meant nothing. "I'm sorry about your divorce, Sophia, really I am, but that doesn't entitle you to my house." "It's just a house, Angela," my father said dismissively. "You can buy another one. For Sophia, this is about giving her children the stability they deserve." The conversation devolved from there. My father grew increasingly insistent, my mother occasionally trying to smooth things over, but ultimately siding with him. Sophia alternated between looking smugly entitled and playing the struggling single mother card. "I can help you find a nice condo," my father offered, as if he was being generous. "Something more suitable for a single person." "I don't want a condo," I said through gritted teeth. "I want the house I bought, the one that belongs to me." "You've always been so rigid." He sighed, shaking his head. "So unwilling to help others." That was the breaking point. Years of being the responsible one while watching Sophia get rewarded for doing nothing, of working myself to exhaustion, while she took the easy path of seeking my father's approval, only to be continually overlooked in favor of my sister, all came rushing to the surface. "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me." My father looked genuinely shocked. "Get out of my house. All of you, now." They left in a flurry of slammed doors and muttered accusations about my selfishness, leaving me standing alone in my dining room, surrounded by the remains of our unfinished dinner. As the sound of their car engine faded down the street, I sank into a chair and let the tears come. This should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare of betrayal and hurt. I sat there for hours replaying the conversation and wondering if I was in fact being selfish. Was I wrong to want to keep what I had worked so hard for? Was family obligation more important than my own dreams and goals? By the time I dragged myself to bed, one thing had become clear. This conflict was far from over, and I had a feeling things were about to get much worse. The days following the disastrous housewarming party were filled with a barrage of manipulative messages from Sophia. Each text was carefully crafted to make me feel guilty for not sacrificing my home for her needs. The kids asked when we're moving to Auntie Angela's pretty house. One message read, "It broke my heart to tell them it might not happen. Tommy cried himself to sleep." Another said, "Just had another rent increase notice. Don't know how I'll manage next month with everything else. Sure wish I had a sister who cared about family." I tried ignoring the messages at first, hoping the issue would fade if I didn't engage. But Sophia was persistent, and soon the pressure expanded beyond just her texts. My phone rang early on a Tuesday morning. It was my Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, whom I hadn't spoken to in months. "Angela, honey, I heard about your situation," she began without preamble. "My situation?" I asked, confused. "With your new house and Sophia's needs. Your father called me very upset. He says you're refusing to help your sister during the hardest time of her life." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Aunt Patricia, that's not what's happening at all. Dad and Sophia expect me to give her the house I just bought. Not help her find one, not loan her money for rent, but literally hand over my house to her." There was a pause. "Well, I'm sure they don't expect you to just give it to her. Maybe you could work out a payment plan or something." "No, that's exactly what they expect. Dad literally said Sophia deserves my house more than I do." "Oh." Another pause. "Well, she does have the children to consider. And you're doing so well in your career." I ended the call as quickly as possible, but it was just the first of many. Throughout the week, relatives I rarely heard from called or texted, all with the same message: I should sacrifice my needs for Sophia's. Each conversation left me feeling drained and doubting myself. My father's approach was more direct. His calls became increasingly hostile, filled with emotional blackmail and thinly veiled threats. "I've always known you were selfish," he said during one particularly painful conversation. "But I never thought you'd put a house above your own family." "Dad, I worked for 12 years to afford this house." I tried to explain for what felt like the 100th time. "And Sophia has worked for 7 years raising those children," he countered. "What's more important, a career or family? You've always had the wrong priorities, Angela." The conversation ended with him threatening to change his will if I didn't do the right thing. The threat didn't bother me financially, as I had never counted on an inheritance, but the emotional impact was devastating. My own father was willing to disown me because I wouldn't give up everything I had worked for. My mother took a different approach. She called when my father wasn't around, her voice low and apologetic. "I know your father is being harsh," she said, "but try to understand he's just worried about Sophia and the children." "And what about me, Mom? Does anyone worry about what I need?" "Of course we do, sweetheart. But you're so capable and independent. You've always managed on your own. Sophia needs more support." It was the story of my entire life being punished for my independence, while Sophia was rewarded for her dependence. No matter how hard I worked or what I achieved, it was never enough to earn the same concern my parents showed for my sister. The stress began affecting my work. I found myself making careless errors, missing deadlines, and struggling to focus during meetings. My boss noticed and called me into his office. "Is everything okay, Angela?" he asked. "Your work has been slipping lately." I considered brushing it off with a vague excuse, but the weight of keeping everything inside was becoming unbearable. "I'm having some family issues," I admitted. "It's been distracting me, but I'll get it under control." "Anything you want to talk about?" Before I knew it, I was telling him the whole bizarre situation. When I finished, he looked genuinely shocked. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You bought a house with your own money after years of saving, and your family thinks you should just give it to your sister because she has kids and you don't." Put so bluntly, the absurdity of the situation hit me anew. "Yes, that's exactly it." "That's insane," he said simply. "You know that, right? No reasonable person would expect that of you." His validation was like a life raft in a stormy sea. For the first time since the conflict began, I felt sure that I wasn't the unreasonable one in this scenario. That evening, I met my best friend Jamie for dinner and shared the latest developments. Unlike my family, Jamie had known me since college and had witnessed firsthand my years of hard work and sacrifice. "Your family is completely out of line," she said firmly. "I can't believe they're even asking this of you, let alone pressuring you like this." My father actually said Sophia deserves my house more than I do, I told her, still stunned by the statement days later. "That's such bull," Jamie said, shaking her head. "You worked your ass off for that house. Sophia made her choices, and now she has to live with them just like everyone else." "The thing is," I confided, lowering my voice, "sometimes I wonder if I am being selfish." "She does have the kids to think about." Jamie leaned forward, her expression serious. "Listen to me, Angela. There's a difference between being selfish and having healthy boundaries. Would it be nice if you could help Sophia find stable housing?" "Sure. Does that mean giving her your house? Absolutely not. That's an unreasonable expectation, and you shouldn't feel guilty for refusing." Her perspective helped reorient my moral compass, which had been spinning wildly under the onslaught of family pressure. I wasn't being selfish. I was protecting something I had earned through years of discipline and hard work. The next day, I received a disturbing call from a coworker who lived in my neighborhood. "Hey, I just saw your sister outside your house showing some people around the yard. I thought you might want to know." Alarmed, I left work early and drove home only to find Sophia standing in my driveway with a moving truck parked on the street. Several boxes and small pieces of furniture were already stacked on my front porch. I screeched to a halt and jumped out of my car. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Sophia looked up, not even having the grace to appear embarrassed at being caught. "Oh, good, you're home. Can you unlock the door? The movers need to start bringing things inside." I stared at her in disbelief. "No, I will not unlock the door. This is my house, Sophia. You cannot move in here." "Don't be difficult, Angela. Dad said you'd come around eventually. I'm just getting a head start on the move. The apartment lease is up next week." The audacity was stunning. "I don't care what Dad said. I am not giving you my house. Not now, not ever. So you need to load all this stuff back in that truck and leave. Now." Her expression transformed from casual entitlement to ugly anger in an instant. "You always have to make everything difficult, don't you? You just have to be the perfect one, the successful one, while the rest of us struggle." "Your struggles are not my responsibility," I said, standing my ground even as she moved toward me aggressively. "And this house is mine." "Not for long," she spat. "Dad's on my side. The whole family is on my side. When I'm done, you'll have no one left who supports you. Is this house worth losing your entire family over?" As she stormed off, directing the movers to reload the truck, I was left wondering if she might be right. Was I about to lose my entire family over this conflict? And if so, was standing my ground worth the cost? But as I walked into my house and looked around at the space I had created for myself, at the physical manifestation of years of hard work and sacrifice, I knew I couldn't give in. This was about more than just a house. It was about valuing myself enough to protect what I had earned. The question now was, how far was Sophia willing to go to get what she wanted? And what was she hiding that made her so desperate to claim my house as her own? In the aftermath of Sophia's attempted move, a nagging suspicion took root in my mind. Something about the whole situation felt off. Why was she so desperate to get my specific house? Sure, it was in a good school district and had more space than her apartment, but there were other options that didn't involve taking her sister's home. And why had the divorce happened so suddenly? Last I'd heard, she and Marcus had been planning a vow renewal for their 7th anniversary. These questions kept me awake at night, turning over and over in my mind without resolution. Finally, I decided to go directly to the source. I still had Marcus's number in my contacts, though we hadn't spoken since the divorce proceedings began 6 months ago. I called him on a Saturday morning, half expecting him not to answer. But to my surprise, he picked up on the third ring. "Angela." He sounded wary, but not hostile. "Is everything okay?" "Hi, Marcus. Sorry to call out of the blue like this. Everything's fine, or well, not fine exactly. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about what happened between you and Sophia." There was a long pause. "What did she tell you happened?" His question confirmed my suspicion that there were two very different versions of the story. She said you cheated on her with a coworker and left her for this other woman. A bitter laugh came through the phone. Of course that's what she said. It's a lot easier than admitting the truth. Which is, I prompted when he didn't continue. Marcus sighed heavily. Angela, I didn't want to drag you into this mess. You've always tried to stay neutral, and I respect that. But since Sophia is apparently using you as part of her plans, you deserve to know what really happened. Over the next half hour, Marcus painted a very different picture of the divorce than the one Sophia had shared with the family. There had been no affair. The real reason for their split was Sophia's gambling addiction, which had spiraled out of control over the past 2 years. It started small, he explained. A few online poker games, some sports betting. I didn't think much of it at first. But then I started noticing money missing from our joint account. When I confronted her, she would always have an explanation. Unexpected car repairs, something the kids needed for school, helping out a friend in a tight spot. I listened in growing horror as Marcus detailed how he discovered the truth: credit card statements showing cash advances at casinos, payday loans in both their names, even a second mortgage on their house that he hadn't known about. By the time I figured out the full extent of it, we were over $200,000 in debt, he said. I tried to get her help, found a Gamblers Anonymous meeting, even scheduled therapy sessions, but she refused to admit she had a problem. The final straw had been discovering that Sophia had taken out a loan using their children's college funds as collateral. When Marcus had told her he wanted a divorce if she wouldn't get help, she had turned the narrative around, telling everyone he was leaving her for another woman. I never wanted the kids to know the real reason, he said. I figured it was better for them to be angry at me than to lose respect for their mother. But now I'm worried about what she's planning next. My mind was reeling from these revelations. Why didn't you tell anyone in the family the truth? I tried to tell your parents, but they didn't believe me. Sophia had already gotten to them with her version. And to be honest, from what I've seen of your father over the years, I'm not sure he would have believed me anyway. He's always seen what he wants to see when it comes to Sophia. The pieces were starting to fit together. Marcus, do you think Sophia is in some kind of financial trouble now, beyond the divorce, I mean? He was quiet for a moment. Almost certainly. The gambling didn't stop just because we split up. If anything, the stress probably made it worse. Why do you ask? I explained the bizarre demand that I give her my house. It seemed extreme even for my family's usual dynamics. But if she's desperate financially... That makes more sense, Marcus agreed. Watch your back, Angela. When Sophia gets desperate, she gets dangerous. And check your credit report too, just in case. That conversation was the first step in my investigation of what was really going on with my sister. Following Marcus's advice, I immediately checked my credit report and was relieved to find nothing suspicious. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. After considerable thought, I decided to hire a private investigator. It felt extreme, but so was the situation. I found a reputable firm and met with an investigator named Diana, who specialized in financial fraud cases. I need to know what my sister's financial situation really looks like, I explained, and if she's been honest about her divorce and other matters. Diana took notes as I shared everything I knew, including the conversation with Marcus. This is actually fairly common in cases involving gambling addiction, she told me. People will go to extraordinary lengths to hide their debts and find new sources of money. Over the next 2 weeks, Diana dug into Sophia's financial history and current activities. What she uncovered was worse than I had imagined. Not only had Sophia continued gambling after the divorce, but she had also started taking out loans in other people's names, including several family members. There's a loan for $25,000 in your grandmother's name from 6 months ago, Diana reported during one of our update meetings, and a credit card opened in your Aunt Patricia's name with a $15,000 balance. That's impossible, I said. Grandma would never take out a loan at her age, and Aunt Patricia would have mentioned something that large when we spoke. Exactly, Diana nodded. They probably don't know these accounts exist. Based on the documentation I found, it appears your sister has been committing identity theft. The revelation made me physically ill. Sophia wasn't just irresponsible. She was actively defrauding our family members. And given her focus on my house, I had a terrible feeling about what she might be planning. There's more, Diana continued. I've been monitoring her recent activities as you requested. Last week, she met with a real estate agent named Karen Jackson. I managed to follow up with Ms. Jackson under the pretense of being interested in her services. What did you find out? I asked, dreading the answer. Your sister was inquiring about how quickly a house like yours could be sold and how much equity could be immediately accessed through a cash-out refinance. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Sophia didn't want my house to provide stability for her children. She wanted it as an asset to liquidate for cash, likely to pay gambling debts or finance more gambling. Is there any evidence she's in debt to dangerous people? I asked, suddenly, worried about more than just financial fraud. Diana's expression grew serious. There are some concerning indicators. She's made multiple cash withdrawals immediately following visits to locations associated with loan sharks. I can't confirm the connections without more investigation, but the pattern suggests she may be dealing with predatory lenders outside the banking system. Armed with this information, I returned home with a new sense of urgency. While organizing the evidence Diana had gathered, I remembered that Sophia had left her purse at my house during her attempted move-in. I had set it aside, intending to return it the next time I saw her. On a hunch, I retrieved the purse from the closet and looked inside. Among the usual items, I found a business card for Karen Jackson, real estate agent, confirming Diana's report. But more disturbing was a handwritten note with figures that appeared to be calculations of how much my house could be sold for minus the outstanding mortgage, resulting in a potential cash amount just over $300,000. In the margins were scribbled names and amounts: Vince 80K, CG 125K, and Marty Deadline Friday, with the last part underlined multiple times. These didn't look like bills for legitimate services. They looked like gambling debts with deadlines. I took photos of everything and returned the purse exactly as I'd found it. Then I called Karen Jackson, directly introducing myself as the actual homeowner of the property her client had discussed with her. Oh, Karen sounded surprised. Ms. Williams told me she was in the process of taking ownership of the property from a family member who needed to move quickly due to a job relocation. She said the title transfer was already in process. That is absolutely false, I told her firmly. I am the owner, and I have no intention of selling or transferring ownership to my sister or anyone else. I see. Karen's tone turned professional. Thank you for letting me know. I'll make a note in our system. As I hung up, I realized the full extent of what Sophia was attempting. She wasn't just trying to pressure me into giving her my house. She was actively laying groundwork to sell it out from under me, possibly by forging documents or manipulating our father into helping her. The evidence was mounting, painting a picture of a desperate woman willing to commit fraud, and possibly worse, to solve her financial problems. I gathered everything into a folder: Diana's reports, the photos of Sophia's notes, statements from Marcus, and documentation of the attempted move-in. I didn't want to use this information against my sister, but I was beginning to see that I might have no choice. The conflict had moved beyond a family disagreement about helping a struggling sibling. This was about protecting myself from someone who had demonstrated she was willing to lie, manipulate, and commit crimes to get what she wanted. The question now was, how and when should I reveal what I knew? And would my family finally see the truth about their golden child? Or would they continue to enable behavior that was destroying lives, possibly including Sophia's own? A week after my discovery of Sophia's real intentions, I received a text from my mother. Family dinner at Grandma's this Sunday. Your father wants everyone there. Very important. The cryptic message set alarm bells ringing immediately. A mandatory family dinner at my grandmother's house had all the hallmarks of an intervention, and I had little doubt about who was going to be the target. I spent the intervening days preparing myself emotionally and strategically. I brought the folder of evidence with me everywhere, even to work, afraid that Sophia might break into my house to look for it if she suspected what I knew. I also consulted with a lawyer about protecting myself from any fraudulent attempts to claim ownership of my property. Sunday arrived with the heavy atmosphere of an approaching storm. I drove to my grandmother's house in the suburbs, noting with a sinking feeling that the driveway and street were filled with cars. This wasn't just my immediate family. Aunts, uncles, and adult cousins had been summoned as well. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my folder from the passenger seat and approached the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal my grandmother, her expression a mixture of concern and disappointment that made my heart clench. "Angela," she said, pulling me into a hug, "everyone's waiting in the living room." The scene that greeted me was exactly as I had feared. About 15 family members were arranged around the formal living room, the space usually reserved for Christmas gatherings and other special occasions. My father stood by the fireplace, looking stern and authoritative. My mother sat on the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. And Sophia was positioned in an armchair, looking pale and fragile, a tissue clutched in her hand. As I entered, conversations hushed. All eyes turned to me, most filled with the same disappointment I'd seen in my grandmother's gaze. I forced myself to stand tall, despite the urge to shrink under their collective judgment. "Angela, sit down, please," my father commanded, gesturing to a single chair, positioned opposite Sophia, effectively placing me on display before the assembled family jury. "I'd prefer to stand, thanks," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. My father frowned, but didn't insist. "We've called this family meeting because we're concerned about a situation that affects all of us as a family unit," he began formally. "As you know, Sophia and her children have been struggling since the divorce." Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the room, with several relatives casting supportive glances toward Sophia, who dabbed at her eyes with the tissue. "Meanwhile," my father continued, his tone hardening, "Angela has recently purchased a 4-bedroom house, far more space than a single person could possibly need." I bit my tongue, waiting for him to finish laying out his case. "We've been trying to come up with a solution that helps everyone. Angela, your mother and I have given this a lot of thought, and we believe the right thing, the family thing to do, is for you to sign over your house to Sophia and the children." There it was, the demand stated plainly before the entire extended family. The audacity of it still managed to shock me, even though I had anticipated exactly this scenario. "In return," he continued, as if offering a generous compromise, "we're prepared to help you find and finance a smaller place more appropriate for your needs. A 1-bedroom condo, perhaps." The room was silent, all eyes on me, waiting for my response. I took a moment to look at each family member in turn, noting who seemed uncomfortable with this proposal and who appeared to fully support it. "Let me make sure I understand," I said finally, my voice calm. "You want me to give up my house, which I saved for 12 years, to buy paid for entirely with my own money, and sign it over to Sophia. In exchange, I get a smaller place that I don't want to be chosen and controlled by you." "Don't make it sound so transactional, Angela," my mother interjected. "This is about family helping family." "And if I refuse?" I asked, looking directly at my father. His jaw tightened. "Then you leave us no choice but to reconsider your position in this family, including your place in our will." Gasps and uncomfortable shuffling came from various corners of the room. Even those who might have supported giving Sophia my house seemed shocked by the explicit threat. "So you're saying if I don't give Sophia my house, you'll cut me out of the will?" I clarified, wanting the threat stated plainly for all to hear. "We don't want it to come to that," my father said, his voice dropping to convey sincere regret that I knew was manufactured. "But you need to understand the gravity of turning your back on family when they need you." Sophia chose this moment to speak up, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I wouldn't ask this if I had any other option, Angela. The kids are suffering in that tiny apartment. Tommy's asthma is getting worse because of the mold problems, and Lily needs space for her therapy exercises." She was good, I had to give her that. The performance was pitch perfect, designed to make me look heartless if I refused. I saw several relatives nodding in sympathy, their expressions hardening toward me. I had arrived prepared for manipulation, but still found myself momentarily thrown by the coordinated emotional assault. Then I remembered what was in my folder, and a strange calm settled over me. "Before I respond to this ultimatum," I said, "I'd like to ask Sophia a question." I turned to face her directly. "Why didn't you tell the family the real reason for your divorce?" Color drained from her face. "What are you talking about? Marcus cheated on me. Everyone knows that." I shook my head slowly. "That's not what Marcus says, and it's not what the evidence shows. "What evidence?" my father demanded. "What are you talking about?" This was the moment of truth. I opened my folder and removed a stack of documents. "I've been doing some investigating over the past few weeks. What I discovered explains why Sophia is so desperate to get her hands on my house, and it has nothing to do with providing stability for her children." The room grew uncomfortably quiet as I laid out the facts. Sophia's gambling addiction, the massive debts, the fraudulent loans taken out in family members' names, and finally, her plan to sell my house as soon as she gained ownership. As I spoke, I distributed copies of key documents to stunned family members. My grandmother gasped audibly when she saw the loan in her name that she had never taken out. Aunt Patricia's face flushed with anger at the sight of credit card statements for an account she hadn't opened. "This is all lies," Sophia interjected desperately. "She's making this up because she doesn't want to help me." "Everything in these documents can be verified," I replied calmly. "The loan companies have records, the credit bureaus have reports, Marcus has bank statements, and I have a private investigator's findings, which include surveillance of Sophia meeting with known loan sharks and a real estate agent to discuss selling my house." My father, who had been growing increasingly red-faced as I spoke, finally exploded. "Enough. This is absurd. I won't listen to these fabricated accusations against your sister." But his protest lost power as more relatives examined the evidence in their hands. My Uncle Robert, an accountant, was scrutinizing the financial documents with particular intensity. "Richard," he said to my father, his voice grave, "these documents appear legitimate. This is a loan application with your mother's name on it, but the signature doesn't match hers at all. It's a clear forgery." Sophia, seeing her support crumbling, switched tactics. "Fine," she shouted, standing up suddenly. "Yes, I have a gambling problem. Yes, I took out some loans, but only because no one would help me when I really needed it." The admission stunned the room into silence. Even my father looked shocked at the sudden confession. "I was going to pay everyone back once I sold the house," she continued, her voice taking on an ugly defensive tone. "It would have solved everything, but, of course, perfect Angela had to ruin it all, just like she ruins everything." "Sold the house," my mother repeated, sounding confused. "I thought you wanted it to live in with the children." Sophia laughed bitterly. "Live in it? Why would I want to live in this town anymore? I was going to sell it, pay off my debts, and move to Vegas where I have connections." "What about the children?" someone asked. Sophia waved dismissively. "They would have been fine. Marcus has been pushing for more custody anyway." The mask had completely dropped now, revealing the desperation and calculation beneath. Family members who had been sympathetic moments before now stared at her in shock and disgust. My father seemed to physically deflate, the righteous anger leaving him, as the truth of his favorite daughter's character revealed itself in her own words. He looked suddenly old and lost. "How much do you owe?" he asked quietly. Sophia hesitated, then mumbled a number that made several people gasp. "And the loans in family members' names. Were you ever going to tell them?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The family intervention had completely reversed course. Now it was Sophia facing the collective disappointment and anger of the extended family. One by one, relatives stood and moved away from her, some leaving the house entirely, others gathering in shocked clusters to discuss what they had learned. I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness. This wasn't how I had wanted things to play out. Despite everything, Sophia was still my sister, and seeing her exposed and humiliated brought me no joy. As the gathering disintegrated into chaos, I quietly collected my documents and prepared to leave. I had said what needed to be said and shown what needed to be shown. The rest was up to my family to address. My father caught my arm as I headed for the door. "Wait," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We need to talk." I looked at him, this man who had been ready to disown me minutes earlier for not sacrificing everything to enable my sister's lies. "Not today, Dad. I think we've all had enough for one day." I left the house and drove home to my beautiful Craftsman, the home I had earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt both vindicated and deeply tired. The fight to keep what was rightfully mine had been won, but the cost to my family relationships remained to be seen. The morning after the explosive family intervention, I woke to the sound of someone persistently ringing my doorbell. Bleary-eyed and still emotionally drained, I threw on a robe and made my way downstairs, half expecting to find an angry Sophia on my porch. Instead, I found my father standing alone, his shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. The confident, authoritative man who had delivered ultimatums at yesterday's family gathering was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and aged. I hesitated before opening the door, but curiosity won out over caution. "Dad," I said neutrally, not inviting him in. "What do you want?" "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "I think we need to talk." Despite my better judgment, I stepped aside to let him enter. We moved to the kitchen where I busied myself making coffee, partly to have something to do with my hands, and partly because I definitely needed caffeine for whatever this conversation was going to be. "I assume you're here about yesterday," I said, as I set a mug before him and took a seat across the table. He nodded, staring into the coffee as if it might contain answers. "I still think you should help your sister," he began, and my heart sank. Had he learned nothing? "Dad, I'm not giving her my house. Nothing has changed since yesterday." I know," he said quickly. "That's not what I mean, He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words, which was unusual for him. "I still believe family should help family. But I see now that what we were asking wasn't fair to you." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-reflection than I'd ever heard from him. "The thing is," he continued, "Sophia needs real help. Not enabling, but actual help for her gambling problem. And the legal issues." He shook his head. "I don't know how to fix all of this." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. My father had always been the family fixer, the one who made problems disappear with his confidence and resources. But this situation was beyond his ability to control or repair with money and influence. "You can't fix it all, Dad," I said. "Sophia made her choices, and now there are consequences. Some of them might be legal consequences." He flinched at that. "Your grandmother doesn't want to press charges. Neither does Patricia. They say it would destroy the family." "That's their choice," I replied. "But it doesn't change what Sophia did, or the fact that she needs professional help, not another bailout." My father ran a hand over his face. "I know you're right, but it's hard to accept that my little girl could do something like this." "She's not a little girl anymore. She's a grown woman who committed fraud and was planning to commit more against me." He nodded slowly. "I want to make this right, Angela. Tell me how I can make this right between us." The question caught me off guard. In all my years of seeking his approval and fair treatment, he had never once asked how he could improve our relationship. It had always been me trying to earn his attention, while Sophia received it effortlessly. "I don't know if you can make it right with just one conversation," I said honestly. "You were willing to disown me because I wouldn't give up everything I've worked for. You've consistently prioritized Sophia's wants over my needs my entire life. That pattern doesn't change overnight." Pain flashed across his face, but he didn't deny my words. "I never saw it that way. I always thought Sophia needed me more. You were so independent, so capable. So you punished me for being responsible while rewarding Sophia for being irresponsible." He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "When you put it like that." "That's exactly how it was, Dad. How it's always been." We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes, the weight of decades of family dynamics hanging between us. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out several folded papers. "There's something else you should see," he said, sliding the documents across the table to me. "I found these in my desk drawer last night. I didn't recognize them at first, but after everything that came out yesterday, I took a closer look." I unfolded the papers to find loan documents with my father's signature on them. Loans I was certain he hadn't knowingly taken out. "There's over $50,000 here," I said, scanning the amounts. "You didn't know about these." He shook his head. "The signatures look like mine, but I never signed these. The dates coincide with time Sophia was staying with us after the divorce. She must have gone through my files." The revelation clearly pained him deeply. It was one thing for Sophia to defraud extended family members. It was another for her to betray her father, the one person who had consistently supported and defended her. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said and meant it. Despite everything, seeing him hurt didn't bring me satisfaction. "I'm the one who should be sorry," he replied, meeting my eyes directly. "I threatened to cut you out of my life for refusing to give up your home. I didn't listen when you tried to tell me something was wrong with Sophia's story. And I've been unfair to you for most of your life." It wasn't a perfect apology, but I could see the effort it took for him to admit even this much. My father had never been good at acknowledging mistakes or expressing emotions beyond anger and pride. "What will you do now?" I asked. "About Sophia, I mean." "I've been up all night thinking about it. Your mother and I are going to insist she gets professional help for the gambling addiction. No more money, no more bailouts until she completes a program. And she needs to make arrangements to pay back the fraudulent loans, even if it takes years." It was more accountability than they had ever required of Sophia before, but I wasn't convinced it would be enough. "And if she refuses," he sighed heavily, "then we'll have to let her face the consequences on her own. I won't enable behavior that hurts other family members anymore. I can't." The statement represented a seismic shift in my father's approach to Sophia. For the first time, he was acknowledging that his unconditional support might be harming rather than helping her. "I hope you mean that," I said cautiously, "for her sake as much as everyone else's." He nodded, then glanced around my kitchen as if seeing it properly for the first time. "This really is a beautiful home, Angela. You should be proud of what you've accomplished." The compliment, simple as it was, meant more coming from him than it would have from anyone else. It was the acknowledgement I had been seeking for years, recognition of my hard work and achievements on my own terms, not in comparison to Sophia. "Thank you," I said. "I am proud of it." "You should be." He stood preparing to leave. "I don't expect things to change overnight between us. I know I've got a lot to make up for, and some of it might not be fixable. But I'm going to try to be better, to be more fair, if you'll give me the chance." I walked him to the door, uncertain how to feel about this new, humbled version of my father. Part of me wanted to embrace the possibility of a better relationship. Another part remained wary of being hurt again. "I can't promise anything," I told him honestly, "but I'm willing to see where this goes." He nodded, accepting my cautious response. "That's all I can ask for." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I am proud of you, Angela. I should have told you that a long time ago." As I watched him walk to his car, I felt a complex mixture of emotions lingering, hurt from years of unfair treatment, cautious, hope for a better future relationship, and a new sense of confidence in my own boundaries and worth. The crisis had been painful, but perhaps necessary to break the unhealthy patterns that had defined our family for too long. Only time would tell if the changes would last, or if old habits would reassert themselves. But for now, I had protected what was mine and stood up for myself in a way I never had before. And regardless of what happened with my family relationships, that was a victory worth celebrating. 3 months after the family confrontation that exposed Sophia's deception, I sat on my back porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise illuminate the small vegetable garden I had planted. The early morning light cast a peaceful glow over the space that was truly becoming my home. The weeks following that dramatic Sunday had been chaotic and emotional for everyone involved. True to his word, my father had insisted Sophia enter a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. The initial resistance had been fierce, with threats and accusations flying. But ultimately, the family had stood firm. When faced with the choice between getting help or facing potential legal consequences for her fraudulent loans, Sophia had reluctantly checked herself into a facility in Arizona. The process of untangling her financial deceptions had been complex and painful. My grandmother and aunt had ultimately decided not to press charges, but documenting the fraud had been necessary to clear their credit reports and financial records. My father had worked tirelessly to arrange payment plans for Sophia's legitimate debts and to address the fraudulent ones, often spending hours on the phone with creditors and collection agencies. Throughout this period, I had maintained a careful distance, focusing on settling into my home and processing my own feelings about the situation. The hurt and betrayal weren't easily forgotten, but I was finding ways to move forward without letting bitterness consume me. My phone chimed with a text message interrupting my morning reflection. It was from my mother. "Having coffee and muffins at the bakery near you. Join me." These casual invitations had been part of a slow, tentative rebuilding of our relationship. Unlike my father's dramatic attempt at reconciliation, my mother had taken a gentler approach, suggesting small, low-pressure get-togethers where we could begin to establish a new dynamic. I texted back my agreement and finished my coffee before heading to the small bakery 3 blocks from my house. When I arrived, she was already seated at an outside table, 2 steaming mugs, and an assortment of pastries before her. "I got your favorite," she said as I sat down, pushing a blueberry muffin toward me. "And that chai tea you like." "Thanks, Mom." I took a sip of the perfectly spiced tea. "How are you doing?" She smiled, though the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. "Better, I think. Your father and I had a good session with our counselor yesterday." That was another change. My parents had begun seeing a family therapist to work through the issues that had contributed to the enabling dynamic with Sophia. It was something I never would have expected, especially from my father, who had always dismissed therapy as paying someone to listen to your problems. "That's good," I said. "How's Dad handling everything?" "Some days are better than others." She broke off a piece of her own muffin but didn't eat it. "He still struggles with guilt, wondering if he somehow caused Sophia's problems by always making things too easy for her." "And what do you think?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective, which had often been overshadowed by my father's stronger personality. She considered the question seriously. "I think we all played a part, myself included. I saw the favoritism, the double standards, but I didn't speak up enough. I let it happen because it was easier than confronting your father." Her honesty was refreshing. For most of my life, my mother had been a peacekeeper, smoothing over conflicts rather than addressing their root causes. "I'm sorry for that, Angela," she continued. "You deserved better from both of us." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for saying that." "We heard from Sophia's counselor yesterday," she said after a moment. "She's making progress in the program, acknowledging her addiction and beginning to understand the patterns that led to it." "That's good," I said, unsure how else to respond. My feelings about Sophia remained complicated. I wanted her to get better for her own sake and for her children's, but I wasn't ready to welcome her back into my life with open arms. The counselor suggested a family session next month once she's further along in her treatment. "Would you consider attending?" I tensed involuntarily. "I don't know, Mom. It's still pretty raw." "I understand. There's no pressure," she assured me. "Just think about it." I nodded, appreciating that she wasn't pushing the issue. It was another small sign of respect for my boundaries that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. "How are Tommy and Lily doing?" I asked, changing the subject to my niece and nephew who were staying with my parents while Sophia was in treatment. My mother's expression brightened. "They're adjusting well. Tommy's asthma is much better now that he's out of that apartment with the mold issues. And Lily's teacher says she's made huge progress in school." "That's wonderful." Despite my complicated feelings about their mother, I cared deeply about the children who were innocent in all of this. "They ask about you sometimes," she added. "They miss their Aunt Angela." A pang of guilt hit me. I had been keeping my distance from family gatherings, which meant I hadn't seen the kids much either. "Maybe I could take them to the Children's Museum next weekend," I suggested, "if that would be okay with you and Dad." "They'd love that." She smiled warmly. "And so would we." After finishing our breakfast, we walked back toward my house together. As we approached, my mother paused to admire the front garden I had recently planted. "You've really made this place your own," she commented. "It suits you." "Thanks, it's getting there." I looked at my home with pride, remembering how hard I had fought to keep it. "I meant what I said before, she said suddenly, about being sorry. Not just for the recent drama, but for all the years of not standing up for you when I should have." I turned to face her, seeing a vulnerability in her expression that made her look simultaneously older and younger than her years. "Why didn't you stand up for me, I mean?" She sighed deeply. Fear, mostly. Fear of conflict. Fear of your father's disapproval. It was easier to go along to tell myself that you were strong enough to handle it. But that wasn't fair to you. Her admission touched something deep within me, a childhood hurt I had carried for so long it had become part of my identity. No, it wasn't fair. But I am strong. I survived it. I built this life for myself despite it all. You did, she agreed, her eyes shining with unshed tears and something that looked like pride. You're the strongest person I know, Angela. I just wish you hadn't had to be so strong, so young. We hugged, then a real embrace that felt more honest than any we had shared in years. It wasn't a magical fix for all that had happened, but it was a genuine step toward healing. In the weeks and months that followed, I continued to maintain boundaries while cautiously rebuilding relationships with family members. I did attend one therapy session with Sophia before her program ended, an intensely difficult experience that left me emotionally drained, but also provided some closure. She had seemed genuinely remorseful, though I remained wary of manipulation given our history. My father made efforts to repair our relationship as well, sometimes awkwardly, but with consistent sincerity. Small gestures, like asking my opinion on matters where he would have previously dismissed my input, or acknowledging my expertise in areas where I had knowledge he lacked, demonstrated a shift in how he viewed me. The most meaningful moment came 6 months after the confrontation, when he asked for my help setting up a college fund for Tommy and Lily, independent from anything Sophia could access. I want to make sure they have opportunities, he explained. No strings attached, no favoritism, just education funds they can use when they're ready. That's a great idea, I told him, genuinely impressed by his foresight. I should have done the same for you, he admitted. Instead of expecting you to handle everything on your own, I mistook your capability for not needing support. Better late than never, right? I said, offering a small olive branch. As for my house, it truly became my sanctuary. I finished the kitchen renovation, planted the vegetable garden I had dreamed of, and created a reading nook in the bay window. Each improvement, each personal touch reinforced that this was my space earned through my own hard work and protected by my newfound ability to stand firm in my boundaries. The journey hadn't been easy. Standing up to my family had required a courage I hadn't known I possessed until it was tested. There had been moments when the easier path of acquiescence had tempted me, when the fear of losing my family had nearly overwhelmed my resolve. But in protecting what was rightfully mine, I had discovered something even more valuable than the house itself, my own worth. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships, that standing up for myself didn't make me the villain in my family's story, but the hero in my own. As I sat in my garden on the 1-year anniversary of buying my home, I reflected on how much had changed. Relationships had been reconfigured, painful truths had been confronted, and new beginnings had emerged from the ashes of old patterns. The process was ongoing and imperfect, with setbacks and frustrations alongside the progress. But through it all, I had remained true to myself and my values. I had refused to be manipulated into sacrificing my dreams for someone else's poor choices. I had learned that true family support goes both ways, built on respect and honest communication, rather than obligation and guilt. Most importantly, I had discovered that home isn't just about the physical structure, though I loved every inch of my craftsman house. Home is about creating a space where you are valued, respected, and free to be your authentic self. Sometimes that means making difficult choices to protect your boundaries, even when those choices hurt in the moment. Standing in my garden watching butterflies dance among the flowers I had planted, I felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever challenges the future might hold, I now knew with certainty that I had the strength to face them on my own terms. And that knowledge, that quiet confidence in my own resilience, was perhaps the most valuable thing I had gained from this painful but ultimately transformative chapter of my life. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure to protect something important to you? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how much you sacrifice for others, but by how true you remain to yourself.